Thank you, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Deb Moriarty and I'm the Vice President for Student Affairs here at Towson University. Provide some oversight for the civic engagement and leadership initiatives, and Allison has been a strong partner with us. But I really came up here because I want to introduce to you the newest member of our staff in Student Affairs, Chris Jensen, soon to be Dr. Chris Jensen, finishing up his PhD, really, we've had civic engagement position for a couple of years, but we've finally elevated to a director level position, somebody with credentials, so that we as a university can take our civic engagement and leadership initiatives to the next level. So with that, I will introduce Chris Jensen.
Welcome. As Dr. Moriarty said, my name is Chris Jensen, as the new director in the Office of Leadership and Civic Engagement, and I'm excited. It's a pleasure to welcome you to tonight's program and to introduce the speaker. First off, of course, as new to Towson University, it is exciting to see the attendance. And some may say that we're going to be preaching to the choir tonight. But I will say the choir also needs to practice if they want to perform with impact. And of course, that impact is to uplift and move people. Within higher education, we know that it's documented the fundamental purpose was to prepare young adults for concerned and involved citizenship in a democracy. And providing students with educational experiences that includes a number of community service and civic engagement opportunities will not only enhance the student learning, but also improve the quality in the lives of all of our communities. As we know, President Luschke has emphasized this, rooted in the philosophy that a liberal arts education is the base for all undergraduate programs. The success of Towson University's 10 priorities in the 2020 plan is dependent upon community outreach and teaching civic engagement. And as we, the faculty, the staff, and the students, continue to practice community outreach, we will fulfill the mission of Towson University. So it is an honor to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Alison McCartney, and to summarize her 15 to 20 page vita in a couple minutes here. Highly experienced. Dr. Alison McCartney is Associate Professor here at Towson University in the Political Science Department. She's received her BA from Syracuse University and her Master's and PhD from the University of Virginia. She has been the Director of the International Studies Program and currently serves as the Faculty Chair for the Civic Engagement Faculty Fellows Program. Her research and teaching interests, of course, include civic engagement and the scholarship of teaching and learning. She has received several awards for her civic engagement work, including the Maryland, D.C. Campus Compact Service Learning Scholarship Award and the University System of Maryland Regents Award for Mentoring. Going over her book, as we probably have all finished her book by now, Teaching Civic Engagement from Student to Active Citizen, she emphasizes that colleges and universities must create support structures to foster the civic engagement pedagogy if we are to build the momentum to assist in the fruitful evolution of our students' education and the country's future. So therefore, us as the choir, it is our responsibility to practice tonight if we are to uplift and move the people towards civic engagement. So please welcome Dr. Alison McCartney.
Well, I may be civically engaged. I am not necessarily height engaged. First of all, let's see here if we've got this right. Everybody hear me okay through the microphone? We're good? This doesn't happen, just one person doing these sorts of things. I have many people to thank as we start. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Deb Moriarty, the VP of Student Affairs. It was not only her idea for this talk, but she, at the very beginning of my work and at the very beginning of trying to go forward in civic engagement here at the university, she has been our #1 strongest supporter, and I would not be here today. My book would not exist without her, so thank you, Deb. I would also like to thank Dr. Jim Roberts, Dr. Tony Marzotto, Dr. Matthew Durrington, and Dean Terry Cooney for supporting my civic engagement class, the activities associated with it, and my research on continued civic engagement. I'd also like to note former Dean Bev Leach, who recently passed away. She actually gave me my very first grant to start the program, and her contribution remains near and dear to my heart. Also, colleagues in the College of Liberal Arts have, across departments, in great signs of interdisciplinary collaboration, provided regular contributions for my ongoing civic engagement activities. Finally, here at Towson, Chris Jensen, our new director, and Misha Bird have done a lot of hard work in putting this event together. Finally, all civic engagement requires community partners. And in that note, I would like to thank Rex Shepard and Renee Balin at Baltimore County Public Schools, the Office of Social Studies. Renee is a tireless worker in promoting these events, and Rex was on board from day one, and without their support, this would not exist. And last but definitely not least, I would like to note Hugh Carney. He is a teacher in the Baltimore County Public School System, and if it were not for him, I also would not be here today. And I'll explain as we get further into this exactly how this came to be, this partnership came to be. Finally, thank you all here and those of you online for giving me the opportunity to discuss this topic, which I see as so vital to the future of our democracy. Okay, all that being said, why am I here? A question that I've asked myself many, many questions. Well, let me give you a short version of my story of how I came to be here. Many years ago, back in the summer of 2002, I was working away in my office, a young assistant professor, eager, lots of energy, thinking I was going to work and complete my research project on German-Polish relations any day now. And I was ardently at work on that, and in comes Hugh Carney into the Department of Political Science. And he at that time was working at Woodlawn High School, which is one of the poorest schools in Baltimore County School District. He had done Model UN as a high school student many years ago, and it inspired him to become a social studies high school teacher. But at his school, his students didn't have the money to go to these big national conferences, which are wonderful events, but they cost thousands of dollars, and it was well beyond the reach of his students. And so he came to us asking, can you help? Can Towson University help me and help my students? And I just said, sure, why not? With thinking that there was a model to do this sort of thing. Yeah, well, maybe not. We searched and searched and searched and did not find a model for our type of town gown collaboration. And so over the next years, many coffee meetings, many bagels were consumed as we sought to create a model, which has now grown and developed. We are now starting the 12th year of our conference. Our first conference was in March of 2003, and our first training day was November of 2003. As the conference grew, we started to realize different things that were needed. That, okay, just having the 2-day conference, well, that was nice. But a lot of the students who came were not prepared to just jump right into the conference. They didn't have the skills, the background, the knowledge to just say, hey, I'm going to play UN for one day. And so we created a training day that takes place in November. And then I kind of said, wow, I think I need some help with this. And I looked to my students. And I said to my students, hey, why don't you want to volunteer? You want to volunteer to help out with this training day, right? To take the skills that you're learning in the political science classroom and bring them to these high schoolers and help them learn what to do. And at first they said, sure, Dr. McCartney. And I said, I will take you to Bateman's afterwards for all the chicken wings you can eat. And therein lies the initial agreement. Well, after the first training day, we sat back and said, They said, okay, that was really fun and everything, but I need help. Like, I need to know more, and I want to do more. The students just wanted to do more and more. After the next conference, they, again, free wings at Bateman's, they said, more. We want to do more with this. Can we actually make a class out of this? And I said, well, I'm sure there's a model for this somewhere. And there wasn't. So again, after an extensive internet search and calling colleagues and whatever, I created a new class called Civic Engagement and International Affairs. While there were various civic engagement classes out there in my field of political science, there were not classes that connected international issues and civic engagement. And you might sit back and say, hey, wait a minute, in this globalized world, isn't that a kind of a given? Shouldn't that exist? Well, what did exist at the time were study abroad programs. And I am a huge proponent of study abroad. And I think that definitely, hopefully, everybody will go abroad at some point and learn more about other cultures. But what about when students aren't studying abroad? Or what about students who, for a variety of reasons, were not able to study abroad? Were they just left out in the cold? Much as the high school students, some of them who we were seeking to help, were also left out in the cold? Well, no, I said, let's figure something out. So now my students work on tying together learning about civic engagement and international issues. They learn this by working indeed with the Model UN program, but they also learn it through their own research projects, where they learn about one organ or associated agency of the UN, and what is its connection back to the greater Baltimore area. And they cannot cheat and use DC. Baltimore area only. So, and they're surprised at the connections they find, these global local connections, how instead of it being the United States and our influence going out, that there's this constant exchange, this constant web that's building between global entities, between other peoples, other issues, and those of us right here in Baltimore. They also, to increase their civic engagement, go to Baltimore County High School classrooms, and they disseminate the knowledge that they've gained to these classrooms so that the 10th graders participating also get further information on, hey, I am connected to the world. I am meaningfully connected to it, and it is meaningfully connected, and the flow goes back and forth and back and forth. Now, that's the very short version of my story. But why did I do it? Why did I wind up here? I faced continual obstacles. I faced obstacles in the sense that, first of all, we started out with no money at all. Second of all, I was not given, initial workload credit or any of the normal things that we were given for developing projects. I didn't have a model for what I was doing, because what existed out there did not apply to the circumstances and the students that we were seeking to work with. There were few, if any, rewards on the horizon, and it was a total time sucker in the early days, as Hugh can also attest as well. He sank in a great deal of his own time. And I sank this time in when I should have been following the traditional path to success. I should have been back in my office with my German foreign policy, reading my German, working on it, because that was the guaranteed way to tenure and promotion. And I didn't. And then I had to think, wait a minute, why am I not doing that? Why? I like my job. I want to keep my job. And I thought, what gets me out of bed in the morning? And it's working with my students. Okay, from my former students and my new students, the next question is, okay, but why? Why is that what gets me out of bed in the morning besides my hungry cats, who are rather persistent in and of themselves? And the question was, why do I teach? Why? And okay, I want my students to learn. Okay, but why? Why do I want them to learn? I want them to learn because I want to empower them in their lives. That is what ultimately knowledge gives them. And that is what I hope to create. And once I had that answer, everything else just followed. Everything else. And it wasn't always easy. And honestly, some of my students who are here today and watching online, hello, kept me on this path by continually reminding me how it was helping them in their lives. So that's how I got here. But now let's speak more broadly. In terms of civic engagement education, a lot of people will start off saying, well, isn't that just volunteering? Isn't that just showing up one Sunday or Saturday and going to the soup kitchen, or cleaning up trash along the highway and so forth? Isn't it the same as volunteering? Well, first of all, volunteering is a very important part of our society. I'm not pushing that aside. But civic engagement education is not the same as volunteering. The emphasis in volunteering is on the activity that benefits the recipient or the client or your community partner. The benefit to the volunteers lies in building this community, of which they may be a part of, or perhaps the sense of emotional well-being that comes from having known that you helped others. But it doesn't require a connection to academic learning. It may help citizens' personal growth as they become aware of problems, situations, and difficulties faced by others, but it doesn't require an examination of the political structures, the power relationships, or the ideas that may be contributing to the problem in the first place, or hindering resolution of that problem. Whether done inside or outside of an academic setting, reflection is not necessarily part of volunteering. And then finally, volunteering can be a one-time activity. You do it once, you get your stamp for your hours of, some sort of participation, but it might not necessarily be connected to the rest of a citizen's life. I wish it were, but sometimes it isn't. Okay, how is civic engagement different from internships? A lot of our students do internships. Wildly applauded. I myself work with internships. Internships are now more commonly seen as a way to advance students' career development. And indeed, they do. I argue, good ones. The internship, however, should be connected to traditional academic learning, but it need not always have a direct connection to classes taken. It also need not necessarily be connected to the type of career that is connected to or benefiting the community. And while in the book that I present today, we present models that bridge this gap, indeed, internships do not necessarily entail gaining any knowledge of or connection to the community or add to one's understanding of the political system or political issues. We hope that they do provide useful job training, but again, the additional educational or community value is not necessarily, it's not required. Okay, so then civic engagement. What am I talking about here? Specifically, I'm talking about a larger, more encompassing term, as opposed to maybe political engagement, which can grow out of civic engagement either directly or indirectly. Civic engagement, as I use it, is a catch-all term that refers to an individual's activities, either alone or as part of a group, which focus on developing knowledge about the community and its political system, identifying and or seeking solutions to community problems, pursuing goals to benefit the community, and participation in constructive deliberation among community members about the community's political system and community issues, problems, or solutions. There was your textbook definition. It means actively participating in and seeking to influence the life of the community. Now, these motivations may come from narrowly self-interest. I want my garbage picked up every Tuesday. They may come from moral principles. They may come from altruistic concerns or any combination thereof. But it includes a really wide range of activities. It's collecting and disseminating information. It's voting. It's working voter registration drives. It's designing petitions, distributing petitions, signing petitions, participating in civil and political organizations, attending public meetings, rallies, protests, or, indeed, entering into public or private discussions of community and political issues via all sorts of formats, which today, with today's technology, are only growing. And civic engagement may become political engagement, which is explicitly politically oriented activities that seek a direct impact on political issues, systems, relationships, and structures. Now, let me give you an example to sort of clarify the difference, because some of us here today teach civic engagement. I teach civic engagement and political engagement. Okay? Now, civic engagement, think about it this way. If you say, my community doesn't have a recycling program, and I would really like us to have a recycling program. So what you may do is say, work with a local youth group, for example, and we're going to go around and collect recyclables and start to bring some attention to this issue. Or I'm going to be one of those people who shows my support by putting my recyclables out by the curb. Okay? You are participating in an action seeking to change your community, seeking to do something for your community. Now, on the other hand, working to enact or create community laws regarding recycling, or gain government aid for maybe low-income areas that don't have recycling programs and can't afford them, that would be political engagement. You're directly seeking to work in the political system. Now, regardless of which type of engagement is sought, both civic and political engagement activities are distinct from volunteering in all these ways. And frankly, they require more than just passive participants. That is, individuals who just watch. We want more than individuals who just watch. We want more than individuals who just click like on Facebook. Okay? We want individuals who really actively engage, as opposed to, if you will, drive-by participation. Democracy cannot thrive as a mere spectator sport. And we need a new generation to be able to play in that sport and play effectively. So, but why, okay, so I'm talking about it. Why here? Why are we here at universities supposed to teach civic engagement? Like, why? Okay? We have all kinds of things to teach, right? Whole load of things. Why civic engagement? Well, let me throw out some stats at you. Youth voting. Youth voting in the 2012 national elections, 41.2%. This was well below the national average of 58.7%. Now that was in a national, that's for the presidential voting. Congressional voting, 2002, and I'm going to give you a variance because it's different stats have different age groups, but we're talking about the 18 to 29 age group. 2002, congressional voting, 15 to 18% of youth. 2006, we got a little bit of an upswing, around 17 to 20%. And 2010, congressional voting still hovering around 20% of youth voting. Okay, this is well below any industrialized country's youth voting. Well below. As a matter of fact, youth voting in most industrialized countries is over 50%. So we're way behind the 8 ball, folks. Way behind. Youth voting has generally been a problem in this country. In the 1970s, when the voting age went down to 18, we saw this big surge in youth voting, this big surge in people saying, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to participate in the political system. And then since then it's been going down. We have had little peaks, but it's generally not been that great. And why? Well, one of the number one reasons why youth don't participate is a lack of feeling invested in the system. You hear certain phrases like, hey, I don't have money. I don't have money for these big PACs. I don't have money for these big organizations. So, why should I participate? Well, yes, civic engagement is more than voting. But we also have to think about this idea of the lack of feeling invested in the system and where that comes from. And here's where I get to my tricycle analogy. In Baltimore County Public Schools, 9th grade, students are required to take American government. Good. Like that. Okay. In 10th grade, they're required to take world history. I'm an international person. I also appreciate that. In 11th grade, they take U.S. history post-1877. And then they have this other half credit that they take in economics. When you figure that only about 1/3 of Americans attend college, this is where the other 2/3 are left. They are left with a couple of classes, and the average students, this is what they get. And they go in and they take their classes, and they could do what's called a brain dump at the end of class. I took my exam, I opened the hatch here, and there it goes. Off I go to play video games or something else. We expect them, after these 3 classes, in terms of empowerment, to go from riding this tricycle, this nicely built tricycle, and we say, okay, we've given you this knowledge. Oh, by the way, jump on the 10-speed citizenship bicycle now. You take off, you vote, you do petitions, you do all these other different things of citizenship. Go! After just being given some basic knowledge. Okay? Knowledge is not enough, quite frankly. For those who go to college, they might have the opportunity to see how their studies, their majors relate to the community. They might not. Again, college students often talk about feeling, I don't really count, I'm just a college student. So they may get a degree, and like many undergraduates anybody who advises undergraduates sits back, and they hear the question over again, what do I do? Now what? How is what I have learned relevant to my community? Does my community care? I'm just a young person. Again, we're talking about lack of empowerment. And they as well are not getting beyond the citizenship tricycle. They will all be citizens, whether they go to college or not. Regardless of their chosen profession, regardless of their chosen majors in college, just as they need the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic, they need the basic citizenship skills and the ability to access the system. John Dewey, in his landmark book, Democracy and Education, had a chapter entitled Education as a Necessity of Life. In this chapter, he argued that just as humans must physiologically reproduce to survive, we must also reproduce our social structures through communication and education. He wrote that for a democratic society to survive, quote, such a society must have a type of education which gives individuals a personal interest in social relationships and control, and the habits of mind which secure social changes without introducing disorder. Add to this, at the college level, and certainly indeed at the high school level, but for now I'm going to speak about the college level, our student population has changed. A lot of college education was designed for basically a middle class to upper middle class student between the ages of 18 and 24 who didn't necessarily have to work, didn't necessarily have family, or if they did, they had a wife who worked, and predominantly male, predominantly white. And that's not what exists anymore. No longer are universities and colleges home to just white, upper middle class, mostly male people between the ages of 18 and 24, who are going to have a much more narrow set of experiences and family backgrounds. Now, colleges and universities are becoming majority women, like Towson University. We're getting more ethnic and racial minorities. We're also getting older students who have started or restarted their studies after age 25. This expanding student population comes from a wider variety of social and economic backgrounds and educational experiences, and thus needs a different type of instruction beyond the traditional lecture model. This diversity means that we need multiple tools of communication with our students, as one writer, Newell, writes, as a powerful complement to traditional educational methods. Older students, veterans, for example, may have been used to more hands-on applications of knowledge. And then, frankly, all students tend to respond more positively to the type of problem-based projects that are inherent to much civic engagement pedagogy. Okay, so there's that declaration. So what can exist? How can we get them to jump from the tricycle to the citizenship 10 speed? How can we get them to, hey, at least vote every 2 to 4 years, but frankly to do more than that? Because just voting every 2 to 4 years is not enough to sustain our democracy. It's not enough to sustain any democratic society. So here's my call to action. First of all, at the high school level, those of us at colleges and universities cannot forget our colleagues working with high school students. I'd argue that we need real civic engagement education in high school. Not just lecture classes, not mere service hours. There are, at some high schools in some counties, some extra events, like the Model United Nations we run. Baltimore County has a Model Congress as well, but they're not accessible necessarily to every student. They're also not necessarily always civic engagement education. They're not necessarily always connected to learning in the classroom if you're talking about service hours. I have heard some horror stories in my time about these required service hours, 75 service hours that students are required to do between 6th grade and graduation. I heard a story this semester in civic engagement class where a student said, "Oh, those service hours? What a joke." Okay? I had mine marked off on my report card, and I never had any idea what I did for it. And I found that to be a common phrase. I don't know what I did. Somebody just marked it, and so I guess I did something. I don't know what. I've also heard people say, "Oh, well, you know, the guidance counselor just told me to go around and pick up trash around school one afternoon and then just signed off on everything." Now, our guidance counselors are definitely way overworked, and I'm by no means blaming them. I actually have other people to blame, and I'll get there in just a minute. But we need more examples. And indeed, in the book, there is an example of a high school teacher who has gotten her students, and again, this is regardless of major or political, or necessarily I want to go into politics or political science. She's gotten her high school students to sign up and work as poll workers, as high schoolers, so that they go into the process, they figure out how the whole voting thing really works from the inside. They also get meaningful contact with older Americans who are quite often the poll workers. So they get to spend the whole day, and they go in with lists of questions about asking these people, "Hey, what were your experiences? You know, what was life like for you?" Some of them wind up not talking about politics. A lot of women talk about, you know, what did you know, how were things different as women? I even heard that people asked questions like, what's your favorite holiday and what happened for Christmas when you were a kid? You know, but just different things that are about connecting the community together, as well as, frankly, learning the nuts and bolts of how our political system works. So there are things that can be done. I also call for more options at the college level. I argue that every single department should be able to have civic engagement education. Why are there limits? Political science, hey, we're not the only ones doing this right now. There are people here from other departments, other colleges, who are engaged in civic engagement education. It can be done if we have the will to do it. I'm not arguing that every professor has to do it. I'm just arguing that in every department. And the book has ideas that can be used in a variety of disciplines, as indeed some of them, like my own program, already serve interdisciplinary programs. Because the thing is that all professions are impacted by politics. All professions. And we can use all the new tools we have. We can use technology to develop deliberation skills. As again, there's one example of an intro American government class here, which, you know, intro American government, you're not necessarily talking about majors. You could have people taking your class because, woo, Tuesday, Thursday, 2 o'clock. Awesome time. So how do we get this wider variety of students involved? We can use technology. We can clue into students' interests in cultures and areas beyond our borders, as indeed mine does. We also have examples in what you might think are sort of very traditional academic disciplines. We had a faculty fellow who has unfortunately passed away, Paul Poyman. He had a class in philosophy. If you want to think about the stereotypical, just solid academic ivory tower discipline, philosophy is right up there. But he found a way. He found a way to connect learning about philosophy with working in gardens in Baltimore City. Every student should learn how her knowledge can translate to skills that can contribute to participating in the citizenry. Every student should be able to experience experiential learning, learn how to put their skills into action, and actually experience citizenship. Let me read you some quotes about what some of this has done for my students. My first quote set is from students who wrote this at the end of taking the citizenship class. I'm just reading this to highlight some points. One student said, "While in class, I was still ruminating on my frustration because of the thought that nothing I did could make a big enough difference. Presenting at a school changed my thinking about my role in a democracy. An idea can become a norm, and I now think I can make a difference." Another student reflected, "Having the opportunity to develop real perspectives and ideas is something I've not always had the chance to do in other courses. I felt that even just our class discussions were a great example of civic engagement because it was a group of people genuinely working together to understand and to try to make a difference. I think I can speak for a lot of people in our class who left the room on one day or another feeling compelled to continue to consider a problem with a hope to find viable solutions. To me, this is an essential part of civic engagement, actually getting personally invested in learning. Now, that being said, yes, this was the end of the semester. This is when people are hopefully really jazzed about what they've just done, really excited, really proud of their projects. What about years later? Well, I've started to collect longitudinal data looking at students who have been graduated out there in the working world for 5, 6, 7 years now. What are they saying? Well, together with a former student, Sivan, we collected data about where are they now. Here's your VH1 episode. And I'm happy to report there were no disasters. But the next set of quotes come from that survey of students who had since graduated for several years. These were anonymous to me. I have no idea who wrote which quote. So you can't say, oh, maybe so-and-so was looking for that letter of recommendation years later or something. No, they had absolutely nothing to gain from doing this survey, except for, I guess, being happy about participating. So here are the quotes from the students who have long graduated. I think that the most important thing that I took away is that I am not helpless in my community, or even in my world community. Civic engagement took something, politics, that seemed out of reach and confusing, and put it all in my hands and made it seem easy. I learned that I am a lot more capable than I realized. Another student wrote, the class made me see the need for a more collaborative form of engagement, not just by individual action. And then finally, civic engagement class taught me that sometimes voting isn't enough. As responsible citizens, we must justify our vote through our words and actions, and live our vote. Otherwise, we will never see change in this world. Yeah, that gets me up in the morning. All right. Hopefully I've got you all excited about it. But there's some very real hindrances to actually doing this. First of all, here at the college level, promotion, tenure, merit systems. Everybody wants to pat you on the back and say, oh, that was nice, thanks for doing that, good job, here's your gold star. Okay? But let's talk about something real. Again, not everyone's going to be like me and say, I'll put aside my traditional research because I'm lucky that my department supports this, and actually do something. Well, in terms of getting past the risk, time-intensive, uncertain, often long-term payoffs, I had to learn a new area, totally new area of teaching, 2 of them actually, civic engagement, which I did not come to this table doing, and the United Nations, surprisingly. That's not something that I did before. The thing is that we've got to put real money and real rewards on the table, or frankly, most are going to choose not to do it. That's the rational choice that we're facing right now, is that why do it? So we have to adapt our P&T and merit systems to reflect the extra work that is required in this type of teaching. Frankly, also workload. This is much more than developing a regular course. I have done both. I've developed a variety of courses here at Towson, but doing a civic engagement course takes a whole other level of skills. For example, does everyone know how to organize events? Where's Organizing Events 101 in grad school catalogs? Anybody seen that? Okay, maybe if you're in marketing or something like that, absolutely. Okay, but for most of us, this is not part of what we were taught. How about finding out how to work with a community partner? Anybody have that 101 course? No, you're not seeing that one either at the graduate level. How about how to create an experiential education class? Well, if you're in education, I hope so. But if you're not in education, no, that's not there either. So in terms of workload, we've got to really understand and respect what goes into creating these classes. And we've got to have some ways to adjust workload. Okay, there are solutions to these problems. First of all, obviously, we've got to reform promotion and tenure. P&T is the short for that. Promotion and tenure and merit. First of all, we've got to put the scholarship of teaching and learning, the type of research that, yes, admittedly, selfishly, I am involved in. Okay? But collecting this longitudinal data about what students are doing, how they've actually translated their education into real-life goals, why is that not the same as the scholarship of discovery, which is often elevated as the gold standard? We also, in the teaching category, can't assume that it's just regular teaching or regular service, because you know what? It isn't. It would have been so much easier for me to just serve on a couple of committees. Now, some committees require a lot more work. I grant you that. Okay? But this requires more than just the regular service that I did. I very much enjoy, for example, giving talks for the Osher Society, the Osher Lifelong Learning Society. And that's frankly the type of service I was taught to do in graduate school. Very happy that I was taught to do that sort of thing, where I take my knowledge out to the community and give lectures and have discussions based on current political issues. Very valuable. But that is a lot easier than these comprehensive civic engagement programs. Workload. Separate accounting and workload. This requires, again, putting some money, some resources behind lofty words of we want civic engagement, we want our students in the community, so forth. Okay, but how? And some options here. For example, how about a course release? This is a fairly cheap option. A course release when someone's first starting, in the first year or two where they're trying to get a program, trying to get something up and running. This is not just regular class prep. I can prep another different class. I could have prepped a class on the United Nations in the summer. No problem. But not this. It also doesn't account for example, the prep with community partners and all of the logistics that are involved in this type of education. Another possible example, how about getting credit as if teaching an additional course, say, every 3 years for those programs that are successful, because you don't just have buy-in, but you have to worry about burnout. And so to keep people from burning out and creating sustainable programs for the continual extra time commitment, how about this option? Again, it's really a pretty cheap option. It's really pretty easy, but it's not done. Another option would be an extra stipend to make up for the other ways that we have to supplement our salaries, like the equivalent of a summer class. How about that? How about people doing civic engagement programs get a summer stipend as civic engagement person? Now, the question is, where do these resources come from, right? That nasty little question. Well, I gotta tell everybody here, you can't keep expecting something for nothing. I'm saying this to both administrators, state legislators, parents, taxpayers, everybody. If you want these options for your kids, then you have to understand that they need resources. We keep wanting education on the cheap in this country, and as with everything else in life, you get what you pay for. And that 17% local, for House of Representatives turnout stat, that's getting what we pay for, both at the high school level and at the college level. Certain things here at Towson that I've been very proud of. Faculty Fellows Program, started by Deb Moriarty. It has been a great start, and I'm not sure I would have progressed without it. I also have been lucky to get a grant through the program at Student Affairs, but not through Academic Affairs. So that's another problem. Academic Affairs, my dean, my specific dean in my department, have chosen to support my programs, which we run on a shoestring budget, let me tell you. But we need more regular dedicated resources at the university level, at the level of the systems of our public schools, dedicated resources, so those in civic engagement aren't scrambling every year. The proven programs, why are we every year scrambling? If the university wants to really support them, then we should have guaranteed funding streams as long as indeed we continue to show results. Finally, we also need assistance in developing and running the programs and developing research on these programs. Grad students. My God. As a grad student, I got so much out of being able to work on different programs, different research with faculty. Why aren't we giving our grad students these same opportunities while also helping to ease the burden on our faculty? Why not? They then have this very useful experience, especially master's students have this wonderful experience that they can use when they go out into the job market. They can say, hey, I've actually worked with these type of people. I've actually worked in organizing events. I've actually worked with the community already. Why aren't we giving them these opportunities? We also need the support of our state and local leaders, frankly, to do any of this. We need support for these educational initiatives, both in terms of finances and in terms of them understanding that we need to adapt our work structures and allow the development of these programs at all levels, not just supporting window dressing, not just supporting this nice, oh, here's a brochure, or a flyer, or a PowerPoint. No, where's the substance behind these things? And if you're not going to provide substance behind them, who's seen the movie Blazing Saddles? Okay, in the movie Blazing Saddles, at the end, what do they do to try to get rid of the bad guys? They build a fake town, right? And sure enough, eventually somebody kicks in the door, and what happens to the alleged building? It all goes down, and they say, oh, it's a fake, we've been had. It's up to our state legislators and our local leaders to make clear that we can't just keep building facades. We really need to have actual, not buildings per se here, but we need to have actual real resources. And finally, we need the support of parents and citizens. We need parents and our citizens to say, hey, we want this type of education. We want our students, our kids to have these options. We can support it like we do sports. There are parents who will say, oh, like at the high school level I've heard, oh no, I don't want my student to necessarily have to do this stuff, to drive them to do something after school. Oh, but I will definitely drive them to soccer practice. Oh yeah, I'll drive to the soccer games, I'll do this and that. But in terms of supporting their development as citizens, somehow that's not always quite working. They also need to model civic engagement and show interest in their kids' efforts to be civically engaged citizens, to develop themselves, so that hopefully we are have something in between the tricycle and the 10-speed. In conclusion, we all have a vested interest in a stable, productive democracy that can find solutions to its problems, can find solutions bringing members of society from all walks of life, who can peacefully present and discuss different viewpoints on problems and think critically to evaluate policy options. We need people who can find constructive compromises and engage in productive debates, not sling character assassinations and catchy sound bites. We need to ensure that tomorrow's democracy by empowering our people with all types of knowledge and skills, and show them that all of them, regardless of their interests, regardless of their professions, that they can positively, meaningfully contribute to advancing our country. In short, we need a real citizenry, real leaders, like those who built this country and those who have gotten us through our darkest times. And I ask you all to join me in this goal. Thank you. And I think now is where we begin the question and answers. So feel free, there are a number of subjects that I didn't quite get to, but I'm more than welcome myself to hear a lively participatory debate.
I have the microphone, but who would like to? I'll do the Phil Donahue here. Some people know that.
In your talk, you talked about starting out at the high school level and the college level. Do you, either through your research or research from others, have any information or data on starting even earlier? Because so many times by the time you get to high school, students are already jaded or they're already formed in their opinions and their ways. But maybe if you started at the elementary or middle school, is there any evidence suggesting that?
I would certainly applaud that. And I think evidence is just starting to accumulate about going back even further. But that's research, to my understanding, that's more in its infancy. So that's a very, very good point. Let me bring up a point about why some people are afraid of that and why they're afraid of college level civic engagement education. And the word is indoctrination. They are worried that getting their kids involved in some sort of civic engagement education means that, oh my gosh, my kid's going to turn into a Democrat, my kid's going to turn into a Republican, my kid's going to turn into a Green or a Libertarian or whatever the teacher's viewpoint is. That's what's going to happen. But actually, a lot of research coming, for example, out of the Carnegie Foundation has shown that that's not the case. We can do civic engagement education without partisan indoctrination. Homelessness, debt, poverty, the conditions of our schools, the conditions of our streets, these are not partisan issues. I don't think that Republicans are any less concerned about poverty than Democrats or anyone else. I find that difficult to believe. And frankly, anyone who says, oh, you're a Republican, you don't care about poverty, you're a Democrat, you don't care about debt, it's not exactly a deep evaluation of the situation. So it can be done. And again, there are examples in the book of exactly how to do that. What matters in terms of getting there is creating an open atmosphere in the classroom for discussion. That's one of the most important things. It also matters what kind of activity you have them do to make sure that students know that they have options to voice concerns, they have options to voice issues. So, frankly, it's about empowering them from the very beginning.
Other questions? Comments?
You mentioned diversity, and that they changed from the former model of white upper-class males, 18 to 22, being college students. Now it's a much more diverse student body. I wondered if you'd comment more on that, because one of the most important tasks for the modern university is prepare students for work life and life in general, citizenship, in an increasingly multicultural world. How does service learning help with that above and beyond traditional forms of learning?
Well, in a couple of ways. First of all, regardless of one's background and particular characteristics, service learning and civic engagement, service learning is a type of pedagogy which is often used in civic engagement education. First of all, it connects people to people. So people become exposed to those from other backgrounds, with other experiences, perhaps from other ethnic groups. Again, it's this question of exposure to help us understand diversity. So I would say from the get-go, just the type of education, it is inherent to it. Second of all, in case of diversity, we don't all learn the same way. Different things work for different people. And this type of experiential education gets people their hands, if you will, their hands dirty. Hopefully not literally, but maybe it does. But it helps them really grasp the information in a variety of different ways beyond the traditional lecture format. Myself, listening to a traditional lecture, there are good days and there are bad days. But if I'm there and I have a task and I'm working with others, then I am invested personally in what's going on and what's happening. And so you're bound to reach a variety of people who are going to have different skills. And I'm thinking here, for example, what about somebody with dyslexia? They tend to not work as well with PowerPoints, okay, because they don't necessarily read them so well. What about someone with other types of learning disabilities? The traditional lecture format may not work so well. So we assume that everybody learns exactly the same way and gets the exact same thing from every lecture that we do, and they don't. And civic engagement education is a way to branch beyond that. It's not the only solution by any means, okay? But it is one of the ways to branch beyond that. And frankly, also, the final point is the students who are older, who have some real experience, it's a way to connect to their experience, whether it's been off in Afghanistan, whether it's been working a job, whether it's been working in their community, a way to have them connect what they have experienced with academic theories. So hey, let's test this now. This is what I learned, this is what I did. Now here's a theory. How do we get some practical applications to test various theories? So they can way enrich a classroom and enrich their understanding through connecting theory to practice, not only for those who have done it, but for those who are about to do it.
Okay, so I'm a student, obviously, in your civic engagement class here at Towson, but I chose to be in that class because it's where my interests are. When you're talking about on a high school level, empowering these students, would you approach it where they become civically engaged in areas that interest them specifically, or would there be a required project or a required area of engagement that you would encourage, or do you encourage personal interests?
I would say we first do have to give them the tricycle. Okay, the tricycle is the first step. You have to start with knowledge of how the system works. Okay, the kind of base point. But then in terms of activating that knowledge, if you will, like riding the tricycle and then going from the tricycle onto the next bike out there, I would connect it to people's interests. We tend to all work harder on something that we are particularly interested in, or perhaps personally tied to or invested in, maybe something connected with our experience. But again, I think that there are ways to do this, where you can have broader parameters for projects and say, hey, okay, pick your topic. Are you interested in the environment? Cool, great. Why don't you work in the area in the environment? Are you interested in refugees who are being resettled in the Baltimore area, immigration issues? Great, fine. You can work in that area. Sounds good. So that would be my argument, is that people should find, and this is, again, goes beyond how do you get from the tricycle to the 10-speed. And I think definitely people's interests are a part of bridging that gap and pulling on what they, where they're already thinking. Because frankly, we cannot all be experts in every aspect of our democracy. Here I am, okay, up here, PhD, and I am not going to tell you that I am an expert in every aspect of our democracy. Okay? It can't happen. Okay? But do I need to have the basic framework, the basic bicycle? Yeah. And then, hey, maybe my bicycle is blue because that's where my interests are. Or my bicycle is green because that's where my interests are.
Could you elaborate on the relationship between socioeconomic status, or let's just say poverty, and the opportunity for more students to become empowered? And I say that knowing the status of social studies in education statewide. And what are the advantages of universities to reach out to those communities and empower students that may not have those opportunities?
Okay. First, before I answer that question, I'm going to just give a shout out to Misha in the back to check online on our Facebook site and see if there are online comments, if you could. Sorry for that interruption. And now I want to get to your question, because that is indeed one of the big questions. That's why I, frankly, wound up starting in this, okay, was the question of, hey, it's easy to reach the upper middle class kid whose family has been talking about political issues. They get a newspaper delivered to the house. Their parents vote. Because indeed, economic status is highly correlated with voting and participating in all types of our democracy, at all levels. Okay, so that's easy. Okay, what about everybody else? And the majority of people are not upper middle class and higher. And certainly in the Baltimore area, we indeed face this problem. So I'd say that makes it an extra responsibility of schools. Schools need to get engaged in these areas where maybe parents don't have the time for very legitimate reasons. They're working 2-3 jobs just to pay the bills. So they don't necessarily have time to sit down with their kids as often as they might like and work on developing these sorts of skills. So I'm just going to start from there. The types of research that's come out thus far has shown that civic engagement education can make up for a lot of things that students are otherwise missing. They can make up for the fact that your family does not get the newspaper daily. Of course, these days that's dwindling, but that your parents don't read the news online every day, watch the news online or on TV every day, and so forth. That that's not the culture of the family that you were brought up in. That they don't, they're brought up with this whole idea, oh, politics is too polite, it's impolite, we can't talk about politics. Okay, so then nobody talks about it and so forth, but how do we get beyond that? How do we build? That's where civic engagement education can pop in. It can also pop in by sort of kind of getting around some emotionally charged political discussions that can take place within families. We've all been there, come on. We all have one story or two or three about some holiday where somebody got upset about somebody else because of their political views within a family. And so what the schools can teach is they can teach constructive deliberation. Constructive deliberation relies on facts, not rhetoric. Proven, verifiable evidence. It also relies on respect. And respect means that you don't just say, oh, you're a bad person for thinking that way, or you must be a bad person if you agree with this position or that position, and so forth and so on. Instead, students will become empowered citizens if they are respected, like everything else in life. If they are taught that they can be respected for their views, if they are taught that they can be respected while participating in the body politic, then they're going to be much more likely to engage. And indeed, right now, respect is something that is sorely lacking. Now, whether or not there's a correlation between the rise in partisanship in this country, this kind of acrimonious partisanship, and the decline of civics education in secondary education, well, I just would not be surprised. So, again, we need to teach people how to effectively and respectfully deliberate, and I think schools are the best place. Okay.
We did have some technical difficulties, but there was no comments back there
Okay.
at this time. So, any other comments or question?
Tying off the last question and also sort of a follow-up to my earlier question, obviously it's important to teach the students, that's where everything kind of starts, but the student population is a very small segment of the overall population. Mm-hmm. Is there a feasible, viable way to reach out to the post-school, either those who have graduated, gone off to other jobs, those who left during high school or even middle school, without only targeting those who self-select in to civic engagement forums? Is there a way to do it without being preachy, without sounding like, we need to teach you because you're wrong or you're uneducated? How would you go about doing that?
Well, I think our media kind of needs to maybe listen to that particular question that you posed. I think there are options for continuing education. For example, community colleges I think could be a great asset in fostering the development of these types of skills. I think online education is another great asset, whether at the college level, whether community college, or whether there's sort of nonprofits that would want to get involved in this. For, okay, how do we practice constructive, positive deliberation where we can perhaps, at the end of the day, we might agree to disagree, but can we learn something from each other? And I see, again, the online format as being just the wonderful way to reach people of all generations, all ages, in all parts of the country, frankly, in various parts of the world as well. So hopefully that gets to the beginning of an answer. And the great thing about a lot of online things is that it can be done really relatively cheaply, so that economic status is not, again, not a limitation to learning and or practicing effective political participation.
I just had a question. When we're teaching the students, there's 3 levels of government. You say that we should teach them, like in our current class, so we involve the local and the international issues and we sort of mix them together. Is there a level that you think we should focus on when teaching high school students? They have more exposure to probably national through the media, national issues, but they have more access to local issues. Is there a level you think that they should relate that would be more easy for them to understand and relate to their lives?
Well, what I would really hope, especially looking at these congressional stats, but then people saying, oh, Congress, it does nothing, and people bemoaning Congress and so forth, I would like to see more education in the K through 12 that focuses on local leaders. Whether they are local leaders that serve in national office or whether they are local leaders who serve in local office. So I think it's easier for younger, especially very young people to connect to someone, oh, that's my representative. Because, as you grow up, your world expands, and when you're young, your world is small. So I would definitely advocate that starting local is probably the way to go in terms of that kind of education. And frankly, connecting to issues that are meaningful. We've become so caught up in presidential elections, so forth and so on, but when you learn about the 3 branches of government, you're like, hey, wait a minute, the president can't just do whatever he wants, can he? And as much as we say we know that, we quite often forget it in what we actually do and where we spend our attention and what we teach our kids. So indeed the schools could help to remedy that problem and develop our country where, hey, we're on the ground, we're here, we're local, and this is meaningful. I actually have an idea on that, which I'll launch later.
So I just had a couple of comments that I wanted to share. Professionally here at Towson, I'm the coordinator of the Deaf Studies program, and we very actively involve our Deaf Studies students in many service learning opportunities. But I personally carry this over into my home life, and I take my family on civic engagement types of vacations. The last several years, that Christmas to New Year's week, we've gone on vacations where we've rebuilt homes for Hurricane Katrina. Last year we went to Charleston and Savannah, Georgia, and we worked in homeless shelters and soup kitchens. So my kids have grown up with this. And this summer that we just finished, my daughter, who has just started her junior year of high school, really wanted to do a 6-week service bus trip. And I think this is a resource that we should think about in our community. There are, through various youth organizations and religious organizations, these high school bus trips. My daughter did 6 weeks from New Jersey to California. They stopped in 14 different states in about 20 different cities. And in each city, they did some touristy stuff and some community work, some civic engagement activities. They worked in homeless shelters, they worked in soup kitchens, they visited old age homes. And my daughter was real tuned into the human side of things. That's what she's always done. But in Oklahoma, they were rescuing horses who were orphaned after tornadoes. And somewhere, I forget what city, they were, I guess it was after Hurricane Sandy, they were doing something in the beaches of New Jersey. And her reaction to that was, what is this? This isn't about helping people, and I want to do with people. But the tour leaders of her group were explaining to her that if you don't do it, nobody's going to do it. And the Hurricane Sandy relief wasn't going to happen, and these horses were not going to be cared for, and whatever other projects they did. So I offer this as suggestions. Alison, your comment was get the schools involved, get the high school kids involved. I would suggest that we look to other community resources, religious organizations or other kind of youth groups that offer these kinds of programs, whether it's during the school year or during the summer, that give our high school kids this kind of exposure and opportunities. It was an absolutely life-changing experience for my daughter.
Absolutely, I agree 100% in that schools can't do everything. But I see that a lot of our civic groups, are doing it, but I see that our schools are not necessarily doing it. So I'm kind of focusing on where I see the holes. But what I also want from coming from civic education is that not everybody has the parental guidance that you are obviously giving so well to model getting involved in local organizations and staying involved in local organizations. So what do we do, again, to diversity issues, socioeconomic issues? What do we do to teach those kids how they can get involved, or frankly, even who to get involved with? A lot of them lack a lot of information to, again, access the system. And a lot of civic engagement education is about I've got my tricycle, okay, but how do I ride my bike? And so hopefully what we can do is transition them in between. For students who, like with every skill, some students are going to be more easily to make that transition because they have a background that allows them to do it. But again, some are not. And I want to make sure we bridge that gap for all of our kids and not just kind of, hope that they are lucky in terms of their birth and get caring, engaged parents. I was really fortunate. My dad was very politically engaged. Very politically active, and as a young age I saw this behavior modeled all the time. I believe it was when I was in 5th grade that he first took me to vote with him. I was so excited. And it was so much fun, you know, to see how it actually works, and that was great. And then one of my prouder moments in 2012 is when actually my father and I and my stepson, all three of us, went to vote together. And so I have a picture, you know, all three generations of us at the voting polls and everything. And again, it was like, hey, this is important, you know, and I'm going to drive you there. I'm going to get up early in the morning. I'm going to make sure you get up early in the morning because you say you want to vote. And we're going to all go together and stand in line and talk about the issues and talk with other people around us about, you know, whatever it may be while we're waiting to get in. And but I'm not pretending that that's true for everybody. Indeed, sometimes parents and families may have the opposite effect of discouraging, of kind of reinforcing images that, oh, your vote doesn't matter, oh, you're young, nobody's going to listen to you, oh, you don't have money, nobody's going to listen to you. And because we can't control for that, I'd like to have some way of a countervailing force, like we do with all kinds of social issues and educational issues through the schools. But yes, absolutely. By no means was I ignoring our other community partners, and indeed many of my co-authors, most of them work with nonprofit community partners, again, of a whole huge range of issues. So, thank you. And indeed, Deaf Studies is proving the case that, hey, this can happen in any department, in any program. We just need to be willing to take those steps, and we need to have the support of our institution behind it so that we can teach our students that, hey, this skill is relevant to the community and can help build up society.
Any final comments? Are you thinking, just to think, this is also National Voter Registration Day. So you may have seen a golf cart or golf carts going around campus registering students. So if you're a student and you haven't registered yet, it's www.towsonu.turbovote.org. If you register today before midnight, you'll qualify for a raffle for a $50 gift card, which you can use then to buy Dr. McCartney's book.
Yes. Speaking of which, don't we have a raffle?
Yes.
Okay, somebody here's getting a free book. All right, Misha. Who's getting lucky?
Bring it up. Clever. So you can draw.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, here it is. Drum roll starts. By the way, if you're watching online, you can still buy the book. You can just contact us afterwards, and we can get you a copy of the book. But who gets their free book? Who's here? See, there are benefits to showing up in person, too. And the winner is Jane Neapolitan from the Office of Academic Innovation. So Jane gets her free book. So, anything else? Oh, that's true. It doesn't say winner must be present.
Would you like the winner to be present?
No.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
So we're going to do a second try. Okay. So Jane had to step out at 6:30. And this person is present. The winner of the free copy of Teaching Civic Engagement from Student to Active Citizen is Cam Swan. Raise your hand, Cameron, you get a free copy.
Come see us at the book table.
Alrighty, thanks everyone for coming. Thank you for your wonderful questions. Really appreciate your support of this project. To anyone who has continued questions or comments that you'd like to go on, I'll be here for a little while. So again, go forth, be civically engaged. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. McCartney. Appreciate it. And on behalf of the Office of Leadership and Civic Engagement, we appreciate it, your work with the Faculty Fellows, and tonight. So I think we've learned a lot and look forward to more as we move forward. So please enjoy the rest of the reception, and if you're interested in the bookstore will be here. So again, thank you very much for being here.